Chairman and members of the Board of Directors of the GraceKennedy Foundation, members of the platform, distinguished guests. I'd like to thank the GraceKennedy Foundation and the Lecture Committee for the honor of inviting me to present the 1996 lecture, and for the privilege of speaking on a topic so closely associated with the work of the Chair of Environmental Management at UWI. Now, throughout the Caribbean, notwithstanding the current volcanic activity in Montserrat, most of the environmental degradation is either induced or exacerbated by human intervention. Now, I know that you're so familiar with hearing the countless situations of doom and gloom that I won't do this for too long, but just to refresh your memory and taking on from where Reverend Reed left off, mentioning that in fact Jamaica now has or is alleged to have one of the highest rates of deforestation in the world. Sadly, Haiti, our neighbor, has a negligible deforestation rate because they hardly have any forests left. In fact, only 2% of Haiti remains forested. Of course, as the forests are removed and the vegetation cover removed as well, so the soil erosion has taken place. And topsoil and subsoil is lost in terms of billions of tons per year from Jamaica, from Haiti, and many other parts of the Caribbean. And the water supplies, of course, are affected in this way because without vegetation cover, much of the water which falls as rain is actually effectively lost from being absorbed by the soil. And so our water resources are also under threat. Take Barbados, Antigua, and even the north coast parts of Jamaica, where the use of water for the tourist industry now far exceeds a sustainable level. In Barbados, in fact, the water use is such that Barbados is now classified along with states such as the Desert Kingdom of Jordan. Contamination of water is also a problem, and in this regard, Guyana goes to the top of the league. In Guyana, a gold mining company was recently responsible for the world's worst cyanide spill. 4 billion liters of cyanide-based effluent spilled into the Essequibo River as a waste-holding pond broke. In Antigua, where the physical environment has virtually been destroyed by the impact of tourism taking over from where cotton monoculture left off, the water table is so low that groundwater is now badly affected by sea salt intrusion. In Jamaica, our water supplies have become contaminated in various ways. Caustic contamination in the underground water occurs for miles around the bauxite mud ponds of St. Anne and Manchester. Rivers are polluted by the effluent from agriculturally related industries. And our poor harbor, well, it is contaminated with just about everything and getting worse, as studies have already shown. Finally, on the matter of Antigua and tourism, I could mention the problem of waste. Each hotel in Antigua is required to treat its sewage, but plants frequently break down, and raw sewage is pumped directly into the sea. As one author put it, dispersing offal among tourists who are happy to be in the sun so that they don't even notice what else they're in. Well, what these examples serve to illustrate, and I haven't even mentioned the guango tree in Ligani, is that the environmental crisis which we face today is essentially a crisis of humankind, not a crisis of nature. What we do about the crisis raises the dilemmas. First, of course, we have to clean up the mess, and that is difficult and expensive enough. But we also have to go beyond the cleanup to find ways of preventing the continuation and repetition of these crises in the long term. Once we start to examine the dilemmas, we find our conflicts of interest. based in many cases on diametrically opposed self-interests, of ownership and right concepts, and in beliefs. So at the heart of the dilemma is the nature of the relationship that we have with the environment, for this conditions our decisions and behaviors. I will summarize, for the purpose of this lecture, 4 major aspects of this relationship with the environment, and these are developed more fully in the printed version of the lecture. These are: 1, our social and psychological constructions of environment, which affect our relationship with it. 2, the conflicts of interest in development and in the valuation of environment. 3, the beliefs and ethics which condition and guide our relationship with our environment. And 4, political approaches to the environmental issues, which either seek to bring about fundamental change or try to accommodate efforts at solving the problem within the existing system. I will start then with the social and psychological constructions of environment. In most cases, environments concern us only from a distance, however close we may feel to them and however great we feel the impact. But in contrast to this is our relationship with the environment that is deeply personal and is felt at the level of emotion. In such situations, the impact is metaphysical, affecting the psyche, the way we look at the world, what we perceive in all that is around us, and the meaning it transmits in the development of self-identity and relationships with and within the natural world. The most incisive impact of the environment at the personal level, of course, occurs during the child's growth, especially in the early years. Think for a moment about the environment which made the greatest impression upon you as a young child. What you remember of it will not only be its actual components, trees, house, forest, main road, garden, and so on, but you will recall the meaning of it all and what the entire total environment conveyed to you. You'll remember how huge everything seemed, and the mystery and the excitement, the fear and the dread, and the security and the pleasure that had an enormous impact upon you at the time. In my case, my early childhood landscape was at Monig in St. Anne. The lake was a great mystery to me. The water which ran in and out of it was underground, so could not be seen. At times the water in the lake would rise from beneath and spill over into the valley. Later, of course, I understood the nature of underground water in karst limestone rocks, which explained the mysterious rising and falling of the water in the lake. But the enchanted landscape of childhood does not become less enchanting because you read and learn about it. Instead, thereafter, every landscape you experience is a little enchanted. But likewise, the hostile environment of childhood does not become less hostile because you read about it, but instead, thereafter, every landscape seems a little hostile. I was speaking recently with a young boy, Shane, who, like his friends, lives in one of Kingston's so-called garrison communities. There, green is the color of a political party, not of vegetation. They're growing up in an environment devoid of nature. The power which they assert over their environment reflects inner anger rather than positive interaction. Cats you kick, dogs you stone, and birds you shoot. They do not find a friend in any of these animals, nor do these animals find a friend in them. In this kind of environment, so many of our children today establish their consciousness of self and develop their worldview. Were children already deprived of a sense of themselves in a natural world, are further socialized within a hostile and abusive milieu, they become a potentially alienated sector of society. In fact, if they do not become alienated, it is a miracle. A study which I conducted some years ago of aspects of the child's relation to the environment included the journey to school. It showed that rural children in Jamaica who walked to school tended towards a more coordinated sense of the environment and of themselves within it. One can be liberated and empowered by the environmental experiences, and nature in early childhood can become a part of you and a part of all that you learn and love and respect. It is also very important to note that such experiences affect not only our relationship with the environment, but also our social relations and our concept of power. Take, for example, the environmental experience of children growing up with different gendered cultures. Into the process of gendered socialization are embedded power relationships and concepts of the sense of there being a difference between the status and value of different types of environmental activity. Power over nature, domination and conquest, that is, the male characterization of the relationship, are attributed high status in society, while caring for and tending the environment, the traditional female characterization, are accorded less prestigious status and worth. There is more to nature than the sum of its parts, and while there are interrelationships in ecosystems studied by scientists, so there are properties of the environment experienced at the level of the emotions, captured by the artist in their imagination, and recalled also by the individual through nostalgia. For nostalgia reconstructs not just past events, but past environments that have been lost. Edward Kamau Brathwaite writes of the migrant in an alien environment far from home who laments, "Where is the bell that used to warn us playing cricket on the beach, that it was midday, sun too hot for heads, and evening's Angelus of fish soup, prayers, bed." Relationships of this kind between people and the environment reflect the lack of any sharp distinction between the objective and the perceived environment, though we often forget this. Durkheim, the social theorist, recognized that nature is a precondition for society, even though separate. Society always has related to the environment and derived meaning from it through the images which pervade consciousness and thereby condition attitudes and actions. Certain types of environment and the images that convey meaning about them have been so powerful that entire mythologies have developed in association with them. A myth or a collective image of the frontier, for instance, of North America, moving endlessly westwards, conditioned the views of that continent and challenged people's responses to it. Notions of unlimited space became associated with ideas of unlimited opportunity in the psyche of the North American settler. Conquering nature through capturing more and more territory was synonymous with power and progress of Western civilization. Later, the Americans moved to the high frontier of outer space. In Belize and Guyana, the forested interior remains frontiers in their economic development, and most of all in the new concept of resource for tourism, as also, of course, in Jamaica, Dominica, and St. Lucia. Wilderness is perceived as that environment beyond the frontier, which, from the perspective of the outsider, is beyond the control and management of civilization. The myth of wilderness, then, extends also to the inhabitants of the environment, as animals and plants, which are outside of our control, are regarded as wild, so people of the wilderness were regarded as wild, even savage. The perceived superiority of the conqueror inherent in the conquest of wilderness is fundamental to the power relations associated with the myth. The challenge lies in the ability of the outsider to conquer wilderness by overpowering the one who remains empowered by the environment itself.